right, good people. May we cluster around more closely, perhaps? Talking to you, good people. And my name is Michael Poulin with Chapter 35 Spokane. And fear, I've decided from reading Nietzsche, is what separates man, that is to say, ordinary man from Superman. And what most attracts me to the Veterans for Peace is that this is one organization that wanders in where angels fear to tread. And of all the issues on the table, and there's many, Palestine is the most fearful issue of all.
So we're all here for different reasons. I'm glad that Israel-Palestine or Palestine-Israel is on the agenda today. I came to this issue after becoming a student of Judaism, and then after 2001 learning what the Israeli government was doing, and much to my horror, and with a great sense of betrayal, instead of doing a Peace Corps stint, I took a 15-month sabbatical and worked on this issue. And there are also, I don't know if Veterans for Peace is doing another trip to the occupied territories. Mike was on a delegation in November. But there are other organizations that lead delegations, and so if you'd like to know about those, you certainly can email me for that sheet as well. I want to thank the organizers for putting Israel and Palestine on the agenda today. This is an issue that impacts all Americans, $3 billion a year for starters, and that's mostly in military materiel. Most of you know this, but I'm going to just sort of recap it for those who might not. Also, we, the United States, protect Israel diplomatically. At the United Nations, we've blocked about 72 resolutions in the General Assembly, and I think it's a dozen or so in the UN Security Council. That does not bode well for us in terms of our reputation around the world. Also, we were the sole objector to the International Court of Justice determination that the separation wall that Israel was building was illegal. It's one thing if you want to build a wall on your own land, but the wall, the separation wall, is about twice the length of the Green Line. The Green Line is that line, sort of a de facto border between Israel and what's called the occupied Palestinian territories. And so the wall actually snakes in numerous places into the West Bank. It is taking many of the aquifers and much of the wonderful farmland from Palestinians to put onto the Israeli side. And the United States was, again, the sole objector to that determination. For years, our foreign policy has supported Israel, and oftentimes to the detriment of the United States. Most recently, AIPAC, if you're familiar with that, it's the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, was pushing very hard for a resolution that would slap additional sanctions on Iran during the course of the negotiations. And so here we are, the United States is looking to solve the nuclear issue with Iran diplomatically. And 59 members of the US Congress, both Democrats and Republicans, were pushed to sign on to this really potentially disastrous resolution that would have basically derailed the negotiations, because one of the terms of the negotiations was not to have additional sanctions, and in fact to lighten up on the sanctions. Fortunately, hundreds of organizations and tens of thousands of Americans lobbied their congresspeople, and AIPAC backed down. Now that's a rarity, because usually AIPAC gets what it wants. For now, the news is AIPAC has sort of given up the fight to push the U.S. into a military incursion, assault on Iran. And or part of what was in that resolution recently was a promise that the U.S. would back Israel militarily, economically, and diplomatically if it attacked Iran. So one way or the other, this resolution was pushing for the United States to take military action. So I credit the American people for getting active, and I know a lot of people give up on Congress and say it doesn't do any good. I really urge people to stay engaged, because we, the American people, also pushed back when the pro-Israel lobby, AIPAC, and this is the pro-Israel, the right of Israel. This is militaristic Israel. AIPAC also pushed very hard for a United States incursion into Syria, for military action on Syria. And fortunately, enough American people pushed back, contacted their congresspeople and said, no way. I was at the Nobel Peace Prize ceremony. Sally Shaw, who started a local chapter of Jewish Voice for Peace, was the recipient of a local Peace Prize. And we got to go to the ceremony, and then we were invited to go to the CNN interview afterwards. And the interviewer sat up on the stage and said to the Nobel laureate, who was the director of the OPCW, the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, said, don't you think President Obama should be here on the stage with us because, you know, for averting a war on Syria? So I couldn't hold back. I went up to the CNN interviewer afterwards and said, excuse me, but I think it's really the American people who should be on that stage, because our administration was really talking about heading pretty quickly to a military assault on Syria. So those are just two examples of the way in which, well, so, you know, power to the people. I think keep at it. Keep letting those, I think that a lot of our legislators, and I've met with many of them, Cindy Corrie, Craig Corrie, and I, and others in the room have done a lot of lobbying of Congress. And I think that the more we give them the ability to stand up on the floor of Congress and say, I'm hearing from my constituents, and they don't, you know, want us to do this, that, or the other thing. It gives them an excuse. They're pushed by the pro-Israel lobby. And it's not just AIPAC, it's also the Christian Zionist lobby. So, and that's a very large lobby in the United States. So they need for us, I mean, it didn't happen with Iraq. I was in Maria Cantwell's office when the calls were coming in, the receptionist couldn't keep up with them. People, no, 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 and we still went in and attacked Iraq. But in some cases, we now have two clear examples where it really, it mattered. So I urge you all to stay involved. Also, it very much in the news lately are some really heartening signs about the discussion about boycott, divestment, and sanctions. Palestinians issued a call in 2005, I think it was, and it's Palestinian civil society. It's not the Palestinian government asking for boycott. It's Palestinian people saying, help, we need help. We are losing our land. Mike, I think we'll talk some about that. Also, Israel now has a plan called the Prower Plan to remove 40,000 Bedouin from the Jordan Valley, which is the part of the occupied West Bank that borders with Jordan. There's a recent report here from B'Tselem. B'Tselem is an Israeli organization. It's the Israeli Center for Human Rights in the Occupied Territories. I just happened to turn, I just at random opened, sorry, I get really emotional about this, to page 71, and here's a story from a father of four, Qassem Darakama. I'm not sure I'm saying his name correctly. He's a 65-year-old shepherd, and he tells how the Israeli military took him up in a helicopter. They shot his sheep from the air, forcing him to witness this, some of his sheep, not all. They then dropped him back on the ground, came with bulldozers, bulldozed his home, all of the buildings for the animals, and the Red Cross came and delivered tents, and the next day or soon after, the Israeli military came back and bulldozed all the tents, piled all the poles and all the canvas on the road. This is part of, I mean, this is ethnic cleansing. So there are a lot of efforts by organizations like Jewish Voice for Peace. The Rachel Corrie Foundation, I think, has put out notices on this. So I urge you to get involved, sign up on some of these lists to get these kinds of email alerts where, and also alerts to contact legislators so that we can all be a part of helping to make this stop. I could talk more. We'll hopefully have a chance to talk especially more about the boycott, divestment, and sanctions efforts toward the end, but I want to hand the mic over to Mike and then to Craig and give them an opportunity. And then Mike Poulin's going to talk a little bit about Veterans for Peace and what they're doing, especially in Spokane with the Billboard campaign, lots of good efforts going on. So here's Mike Hastie. Thanks all.
Can you hear me? Okay, good. Anyway, my name is Mike Hastie. I was an Army medic in Vietnam. Raised in the military. My father was a military officer, so we were in Germany, Japan, East Coast, West Coast. I think, I really thought I went full circle when I went back to Vietnam. I was a medic in Vietnam in 1970, 71, and so I went back to Vietnam in 1994 to basically make amends. I went into the My Lai massacre site, and I left something there that was personal. But I think my trip back to, I shouldn't say my trip back, my first trip to Palestine, we were over there, I went with a delegation. There were 6 of us, 3 men, 3 women. 5 of us were veterans. Well, all of us were Veterans for Peace. There was only one person, Ellen Davidson, that wasn't actually in the military, but she was certainly a vital part of the team of us that went over there. We left November the 5th and came back on November the 23rd. And I think when I say that I feel like I came full circle when I went to Palestine, was that I felt the occupation. It's something that you can feel every day that you're there, and the checkpoints, the way the Israeli military, though I didn't see any out and out abuse, but you can see the superior talking to the inferior. There's a photograph on the table over here that I took, and it shows an Israeli soldier questioning a Palestinian man. And if you look at the posture and the body language of the Palestinian, he's got his head down. There's just all this feeling of I don't want to say shame, but this occupation has been going on almost as old as as I am. And I think that is one of the biggest things I experienced was seeing the occupation as I was a part of an occupation when I was in Vietnam, and seeing the weaponry and seeing the M16s that are carried by Israeli soldiers, that is, these are all American weapons that are being given to these troops, and it's like I saw myself. There was a window of opportunity for me to re-experience, what I was when I was in Vietnam. Okay, so that's one of the biggest things I learned, because I think it's important that people go to the West Bank, whether you're a veteran or not. I think people need to experience it. So it's they say the issues are in the tissues, okay? And I think when you go to Palestine and you experience what you're seeing over there, all of that information now is lodged in your muscles and your body. So the issues are now in the tissues. And so at that point, wherever you speak, it becomes, what you do is you use emotional language. I can't sit up here and talk about, that experience and use intellectual language. That's gone. For me, it's emotional language, and seeing what I saw and experiencing what I saw. Here's a picture I took. This is shortly before I left on this trip. I don't know what instigated this photograph, but what I did is I took a small eraser, okay, and I wrote Israel on the eraser. And what I did is I wrote erasing Palestine since 1948. That's the truth of what's going on over there. And somehow this image just, meant a lot to me as far as me, especially when I came back, because this is actually done before I went over there. And the other one, there's an image here that I want to share with you. I did this before I left to go on this trip. I went to a toy store, okay, and I bought a chess set. And while I was at a toy store, I bought military small little toys like jets, APCs, tanks, helicopters. And what I did is these were U.S. military weapons, and I put them at one end of the chessboard. And then in the back, on the 2 rows, I put all of the countries, or not all of them, but certainly a lot of the countries that the United States has invaded, okay? So here are the countries here, okay, the chess pieces with the names on each country, and then here's the military, weaponry here, and I just wrote underneath it, I says, the United States government positions itself on the global grand chessboard of international politics. And this is what this is about. This is American imperialism. This is what Israel is doing to the Palestinians. And the other, I was involved in about 5 demonstrations over there. I was involved in a demonstration that was kind of south of Bethlehem. It was Palestinian land that the Israelis had put a highway over it. So we went with a bunch of Palestinians. We went with some others. There was a delegation of Germans that were there with us. And what they did is they had a soccer match in the middle of the highway. Can you imagine? This is a highway with high speeding traffic. It was actually an intersection. So what they did is they started playing soccer, and these people were all good soccer players, very, very good soccer players. And so they just kept playing soccer until the IDF showed up. Okay, and they came down, about 30 of them, and they came down, and what they did is they played this cat and mouse game where they walk you to the side of the road and get you off of the highway. So everything's a cat and mouse. They all got high-powered automatic weapons. They all got plastic shields, and so they were pushing us over to the side of the road. And so since they couldn't have a soccer match anymore, what they started doing is they started playing volleyball. Anyway, so like I say, we did that demonstration for about an hour, and then we left and went about our ways. Another demonstration we did, because I was in about a number of different places. We landed in Tel Aviv, okay, late at night. We took a bus to Jerusalem. We stayed in Jerusalem, in the old city of Jerusalem, for a number of days, and then we would take buses, or we would rent, 7-passenger vehicles to go to the different areas that we went, whether it was Berlin, is that what it is? Yeah. Berlin, Jenin, Hebron, Ramallah, Bethlehem. We went to Tel Aviv. That was right toward the end. And then we went to Jaffa, which was just right off the coast there, right off the water. And our last demonstration was we did a demonstration across the street from the American Embassy, okay? And you'll see the pictures of the veterans that were there, that were involved in that, and what they carried. No to U.S., no to Israeli apartheid, no to U.S. funding to Israel. And there was another one, I can't think of it right now. But we had 2 of those, so we had one on each side. And so there was a whole line of people that were trying to get in, Israelis that were trying to get into the American Embassy that day because they wanted to get visas to get to the United States. We stopped that process for over an hour, completely, with that demonstration. Okay, and that was kind of interesting to watch. I could tell things were getting a little bit heated up because we were amongst Israeli businesses, and some people were walking by making comments. So I have a feeling something would have happened if that had been a 2-hour demonstration. Then we had a demonstration in Jaffa, probably the day before or the day after, I forget. And there was Palestinians were demonstrating. We joined in with them, and it was song, and just like a lot of different demonstrations that we've all been to. Then we were involved in a demonstration in the Bedouin community. That was a really wonderful experience to be in the Bedouin community and have someone take us around and show us all of the everything that Israel is doing to that community, as far as, cutting down the olive trees, as far as spraying Agent Orange from aircraft, as far as destroying buildings, and on and on and on. I mean, it just goes on and on and on, And then the other one was we were involved in a major, pretty good demonstration in Berlin, and we started out where we marched. It was quite a few of us. It was about well over 100 people. We were marched down to an area that's a designated area that if you cross over a certain invisible line, then the IDF get involved with you. Okay, and so that was quite an experience, because we got down to a designated area, and as soon as we got too far, they just started launching tear gas at us. Every kind of tear gas canister you can imagine was launched at us. They fired rubber bullets at us. I remember there were different kind of projectiles they were using, but one of the people that was in the demonstration was a man that was in a wheelchair. He had a gas mask on, and he carried a camera, and he was there photographing the IDF. Is what he was doing. I was there with some other photojournalists, and so I was photographing. I was taking pictures as fast as I could, and you can take a look at some of the pictures that I took over there on the table. This is something that was my greatest insight to being in the West Bank. This is a picture of a Palestinian man launching a rock with a slingshot. Okay, and when I came back, there was something about the picture that puzzled me, because I was right there when a lot of them were launching these rocks at the IDF, and they were launching tear gas canisters. There was one situation where the soccer match was going on. They pulled some guy out of the line that was with us. He was from France, and they just grabbed him and arrested him. I have no idea the details. I don't know whether he'd been there for a while, and they had a profile on him or whatever. But here's the truth of what's going on in Palestine. When I saw these Palestinian men launching rocks at the Israeli soldiers, what I saw was American Indians with bows and arrows. That's what I saw. That's what's going on over there. If you want to simplify it to its lowest denomination, that's what it is. What's going on and what Israel is doing to the Palestinians is exactly what we did to the American Indian in this country. It's the same thing. You don't have to complicate it. You don't have to go out and read 100 books on the subject. That's what it is. That's all it is. It's so simple, and all of us know that history. We all know it. We know what our government did to the American Indians. We know what our government did to black people in this country. We know what our government did to the Chinese, to the Hispanics, on and on and on. So that was my greatest revelation, was seeing that, and that in a lot of ways was really coming full circle for me, to see these people and wondering, because my heritage goes back to Native Americans. I'm 1/16 American Indian. Can you tell? Anyway, but so that's probably the most profound thing I saw, was when I saw these Palestinians launching these rocks. And to be honest with you, when I was over there, nothing surprised me. I had heard, I've heard you speak, I've heard your wife speak, I've heard a lot of people speak on the subject of Palestine. I've seen the documentaries, I've read some of the books. So when I got over there, nothing really surprised what I saw. I was prepped, okay? I didn't go, oh my God, I can't believe that's going on. I was ready. I knew what was going on over there. I could see it. It was so obvious, what was going on. It's, Israel, it's slowly committing Jewish genocide against the Palestinian people. In other words, in 1948, you can no longer move 700,000 people off this table. What you do is you move them off the table a line at a time. And that's what they're doing. It's just that simple. And I don't know what the answer is. I think that obviously, I'm a nonviolent person, and I'm a pacifist to a certain large degree, but I will defend my village. I will defend my village. Somebody tries to kill you, I'll do whatever I have to do to stop that person from killing you. If that means taking that person's life, that's what I'm going to do. Now, a lot of people can't deal with that, because a lot of activists, peace activists, are profound, pacifists. They don't know what it's like to be in Vietnam and you've got bombs dropping on your village, or you have napalm dropping on your village, or 155 millimeter howitzer rounds landing on your village. Until you've had that experience, you're not going to know what it's like when a peasant starts running from his village after seeing what he's seeing, and he cocks an AK-47, and he does everything he can to knock that pilot out of the air. If you haven't had that experience, or you don't have that consciousness, then you don't get it. So that's, and that's just how I feel, and I'm pretty emotional about it, as you can tell. But I think that the most important thing is, I think the answer for me, from what I saw, and I think you have to be there a long time to really get it. I mean, you're talking about my one and only trip, and I was there for 17, 18 days. Though, granted, I did have some background. Granted, I do have the Vietnam experience behind me, so I can, once lying is the most powerful weapon in war, let's face it. And once I experienced that lie in Vietnam, it's so easy to see the lie from there on. I mean, it's so simple. But I think I wrote here, I said nonviolence, but aggressive demonstrations. And that's what the Palestinians are doing. They're involved in peaceful demonstrations. And I think for a Palestinian to go into a theater and set off a bomb, I think Israel would write them a blank check, because that's what they want them to do. So I don't know what's going to happen in the long haul. Only that the international community is going to get more and more educated about what's really going on. All you have to do is look at Cast Lead. I mean, what happened in Cast Lead was horrifying. I read a book by one of the journalists that was there. He was Italian. Can't think of his name now. But anyway, he was killed by the IDF, brutally murdered by the IDF, and he was involved in that horrible experience of Operation Cast Lead. And I think you all remember 2008, 2009, I think, or 2009, 2010.
2008.
Yeah, and I think when you read that, some of that stuff, just read anything on Operation Cast Lead, and you'll see how brutal it is. So I'm just hoping that more and more veterans and more American people can go to Palestine, can experience what's over there, and come back and bear witness. Especially, it doesn't matter whether you're a veteran or non-veteran. Once you have that visceral experience, you get it. I think you have to have that experience over the academic knowledge, so that so it's lodged in your tissues. And so at that point, when you give a talk or you give a lecture, you're using emotional language, and that's what has to be used. Thanks, I appreciate it.
So I'm Corrie. I'm the father of Rachel Corrie from Olympia, Washington.
Use the mic, please.
Thank you. I know better. So I am the father of Rachel Corrie, who came from Olympia, Washington. She did not give her life for the Palestinians. Her life was taken. And Rachel is in the back, Cindy. And so I really am honored to hear both of your contributions today. And I'd like to go a little bit different place. I've been to Gaza 5 times. Cindy and I have been to Gaza 5 times. I don't know how many times I've been to the West Bank. And because we have a lawsuit that's ongoing in Israel, I've lived in Haifa off and on for about 9 months. So there's a certain amount of experience there. And you would think that with all that experience, that might make me into an expert. But the truth is, all that experience has kind of made me nuts. Because almost any truth, any observation you can see sort of a counterpart to that. And I'm hoping this works, right? There, okay. So I'm going to try this one time, talking about the yin and the yang of being in Israel-Palestine. And one of the first ones that I want to talk about, which I was thinking Mike, when you were talking about, you go over there to learn something about Palestine. And I think you come back having learned something about yourself. And I think that's one of the huge gifts. And I think you sort of alluded to that. And it's taken me years to figure that out because I'm not as smart as you are. But anyway, I have figured some of that out. And I think that's the overwhelming thing. If you do this work, if you go there, any of this stuff, you really learn more about yourself than you do about the other person. One of the things, last few times that we've been in the West Bank, here's Ramallah, and it's not my photograph. I got it off the internet. Or maybe I got it off of a friend's pictures. Might even be yours. But anyway, it's Ramallah. And what you see there is a huge amount of economic activity, and there is a lot of economic activity right now in the West Bank, and that's changed a lot in the 10 years since Cindy and I first went to Ramallah. It used to be really closed down, checkpoints everywhere, you couldn't get around, and now there's a lot of building going on there. But yet if you talk to the Palestinian people, the people in the West Bank, they said it's never been worse. It's never, in the midst of all that growth, it's never been worse. And so that's kind of balanced. You come back to the United States, and Linda, you talked about AIPAC and its influence and the sort of things it's done here, but we do have a counterbalance to that's been asked for by the Palestinian people, led by the Palestinian people, and it's boycotts, divestments, and sanctions. And I've just got this picture of the people, and actually Cindy and I were not involved in this, and we do have an alibi. We were in Haifa when the Olympia Co-op voted to its management, or its board of directors voted to boycott Israeli goods. And they only found 5 of them, I think, on the shelves. But anyway, they did that boycott. And we went to, they were sued. I don't want to get into all this about it. But in court, a U.S. Or a state judge, district judge, I believe, said that, of course, a boycott is free speech. Kind of made me, I'm a fairly conservative business person. I thought, oh yeah, there was something about a tea party at one time. And you know, with the boycotts are a long-standing thing in the United States. And he said, and of course, the Israeli occupation of Palestine is something that this country needs and has a right to have a discussion about for the last 60 years. And that's coming from a bench. It was cool. So we've got that going on, but then you go to the West Bank and you watch that and you think they're putting in the last brick of that wall in there. It's coming to a solution on the ground. It's really hard. One of the people that I have a great admiration for is Bassem Aramein, his picture here. And Bassem, you're showing those guys slinging a rock. Bassem was arrested when he was 13 for chucking rocks at an Israeli tank. Now, I don't know, yeah, exactly. That's going to hurt the tank, right? But he was arrested and he was put in jail for 7 years. All of his teenage years were spent in an Israeli jail. He gets out. And he may have done some other things, but then he gets together with some ex-Israeli soldiers, and he's one of the founding members of, I just blanked, Combatants for Peace. That's why I write it down here. Now, some of the Israelis wanted to say it was terrorists for peace, because they felt like the Israeli military was terrorists too, but the Palestinians weren't going to have any part of using that word in it. So he was a founding member of that. Now, this picture here is actually taken at the High Court because his daughter, Abir Aramein, 10 years old, she's walking home from school in the West Bank, and an Israeli Jeep comes up. There's some sort of, they're hollering at him. She starts to walk away, and she's shot with a rubber-coated bullet in the back of the head. And she's taken to Israeli hospital just inside Jerusalem. And 3 days later, she's pronounced dead. They had to take her off life support. Now, when we first met Bassem, he's telling this story, and he said, my friends, a few of them could get into the hospital from where they were in the West Bank. They had the clearance to get in. And he said, my friends would come up to me in the hospital room, and they say, who are all those guys downstairs? They look like they're military, Israeli military. And he said, they are, but they're my friends. And And he said by the end of the 3 days, I mean, his friends, his neighbors couldn't understand that. But at the end of the 3 days, they invited these Israeli soldiers back to his neighborhood for the service for a beer. But in the meantime, they're kind of like the people you know. His buddies came up to him and they said, we know who did this, we know where they live, and we'll take care of it for you. You know, and my buddies in Vietnam, I can imagine what they're going to do. And what he told me is, he said, I had to grab him. I had to physically restrain him. And he looks at me and he says, anybody can get revenge. I want justice. And so here's a guy who, the way I say it, his soul is so big that within the hours, he, I think, saves the lives of the people that killed his daughter, killed the little bear. So that's one of the contrasts that you hear. I mean, that you don't hear, but it's there. He had a lawsuit, as I alluded to, Cindy and I and our daughter here, Sarah, had a lawsuit as well, and there's our attorneys, a volunteer, both basically the lead attorneys here on your right, Hussein Abu Hussein and Jamil Dakwar was volunteering here. They're both of our attorneys are Arab Israelis, so they're part of the 20% of the Israeli population that is Arab, and they're been really great help to us. I'll just go through a couple of highlights about it. We've filed that on March 15th, 2003. There's a 2-year statute of limitations that would have run out the next day. The first trial date was on March 10th. The last trial date, that's of 2010. The last trial date was July 10th, 2011. Over there, they don't have juries. So the judge has a day here, a day there, which is why we ended up spending so much time in Haifa. It was the amount of time where it's kind of economically a toss-up whether to fly home or stay there. We mostly stayed there. 15 days of testimony, 23 eyewitnesses, 200 plus pages of testimony, which we had to pay to get translated into English. It's 2,000, what I say, 200? Can't really read from here. And the verdict was given out on August 28th of 2012. And in that let's see, this is the, we said, so this is the complaint, that Israel injured Rachel's right to life and her human rights, and that the killing was either intentional or gross negligence. The findings from the judge, it was as if he just simply wrote from the state's attorney's initial briefs. Not only did he not hear our witnesses, he didn't hear the state's witnesses because they contradicted each other, they contradicted themselves, even while they were on the stand, they contradicted what they said earlier on the stand and what they said earlier. But all that just kind of got washed over. It actually literally was dismissed after all this as because the judge said it was an act of war, and basically Israel can do whatever it wants to as an act of war. Now that flies in the face of all sorts of international jurisprudence, but that's what he said. And also he said Rachel was in a closed military zone and was responsible for her own death. Now that our attorneys kept asking for the military, the Israeli military, to show any order that said it was a closed military zone. They could not come up with, never did. And what's more, the captain that was out in the field that day, there were 2 bulldozers, each of which had 2 people in it, and an armored personnel carrier, and the captain was in the armored personnel carrier. He said under oath that he didn't think it was a closed military zone, and he didn't think he had the authority to make one. Now, I don't know what difference that makes. You don't have the right to crush somebody, even if they're in a closed military zone. But anyway, that's where it was. If you want to read more about it, there was a really good article by Richard Silverstein, and I think you can find that out. Well, I've got a connection here, but you can get it also, go out to our website, Rachel Corrie Foundation, and find that there. It was commented on by the President Carter's Foundation, and President Carter had some words of outrage about that verdict, and also by Richard Falk, who is the special rapporteur from the UN. Still, he's about to retire from that. And so we now have an appeal underway, and we go back May 21st of this year to Haifa, and we're appealing that to the High Court. I want to talk a little bit about Rafah, a small place that Rachel went to, and the Gaza Strip, because I think it's a little different. You talked about how, and I think you got it right, you started out a little bit with talking about how what you saw was like U.S. imperialism, but it's a huge difference over there, particularly in the West Bank, because imperialism is a little different than colonialism, and what they have in the West Bank is colonialism, because they're moving their own population in there. And so it is exactly like, in my opinion, what we did to the Native Americans. They know that story, and I've met some Americans that, Native Americans that have listened to this and say, I know that. That's the story of my people, when you talk about this. So, but in the Gaza Strip, they did have a number of colonies in there, but those have been taken out. So it's really under siege now. It's a little different way to say it, although our government, our State Department, still says that it's under occupation. They don't make a distinction between siege and occupation. So legally, it's occupation. And I just want to talk to you because you hear a bunch of different things. You hear Israel has the right to defend itself, and what about all those rockets that are coming out? You also hear that Hamas, you can't bargain with Hamas. So what are you going to do? You know. So I just had this left over from what you were talking about before. This is a graph of the rockets leading up to Khaled, and what you see is that there was an agreement. They didn't sign the same piece of paper because they don't recognize each other, but Hamas and Israel had decided, Hamas had a ceasefire, basically. And you can start talking about all those rockets that came out. Like in October, there was one rocket and one mortar. And that's not even to discuss that most of these rockets are homemade. A lot of them that go up in the air may land on the people that fire them off, and a whole lot of them have no real warhead on them, so there's not something that explodes at the end of the end. But I've been under rocket fire in Vietnam. It's not fun, and it doesn't matter if it hits you, you know, how it was aimed or any of that stuff. But anyway, the lesson here is that the ceasefire held, and it held up until Israel went inside the Gaza Strip and killed 5 citizens of Gaza. And that was done on a big media night here in the United States when Obama was elected. So we weren't paying close attention, and they could go in and do that. And that's when, essentially, after that, the rockets started up, and you had Khaled. I want to talk about, so you hear about the people that are there, and I just want to introduce you. Have any of you here met this couple? They're one of the brothers that was behind the wall that Rachel was in front of, Khaled Nasralla, his bride there, and at that time, their youngest of babies. This picture was taken in LAX, so they're in the United States. To get to the United States, this family that was living in the house that Rachel was trying to protect had to go to Tel Aviv at that time and had to get apply for a, what am I trying to say? Visa, yeah, thank you. And so to get there, they had to have permission from the Israeli military to get out of the Gaza Strip and go to Tel Aviv. So after their home had been destroyed, the home was destroyed about 6 months after Rachel was killed, they got that permission, went to the United States Embassy, got a visa, and managed to come to the United States. Now, you also don't get a visa very easily if you're a 34-year-old Palestinian male. But neither the United States nor Israel had anything against this family whose home they had already destroyed in the Gaza Strip. So the reason I'm bringing it up here, when you think about what we hear about and what we here in this room know is not terrorists, but there's a home, and if you look carefully, it's got like pockmarks on it, and someone made me hear about it. The children, not Khaled lived upstairs, somewhere on here, I've got a little blinker, but I don't know how to use it. Yeah, Khaled lived upstairs, and his older brother lived down here, and the older brother, Dr. Smear's children lived in this front room. Those pockmarks are bullet holes. The Israeli military had come past and shoot into that house. And when we got there and Cindy took the picture, we found out that their whole family, and Rachel wrote about it, would sleep in the parents' bedroom, which was back behind. So they had the outside wall, the inside wall of the children's bedroom, and the living room wall, all of a concrete to stop those bullets. And that would pretty much do it. But while we were there, Cindy took a picture of little Iman. She's about 6 years old there, and she's petting a rabbit. And Khaled, her uncle, told me about this rabbit. and the other 22 rabbits that we saw that were there at the time. They're isolated. They can't have children in and out. They're being shot at. And so Khaled got worried about what you do and what to do about that. He talked to a psychologist, and then he got a book on raising rabbits. He went out and bought 3 rabbits, and 6 months later they had 23 rabbits. They're just for pets. But the whole idea was that the children and the family and the adults would have something soft to take care of, something to love. And so, again, what you learn for yourself coming back is that when somebody takes everything from you, threatens your children, takes your house, takes your family, the prized possession of their TV, what do you do? What's the most important thing to do is to hang on to the capacity to love. That's the most important thing. Yeah, that's worth something. Did I just turn that off? Okay, so back in 2009, when Cindy and Linda and I were there, we had to go and take pictures to see that that there was shelling there, the damage of the bulldozers they've done, the white phosphorus that destroyed the house to the right. That you had to do at that time. We had to go and find that out. You're not going to get it through TV. But we were back there in early November of 2011, and the bombs started dropping the night before we left. But when we got back to the United States, there's Anderson Cooper. I think he was standing on the top of the hotel that we had stayed in Gaza, and he's reporting this time from inside Gaza. Huge change. And you know, of course, the attack went on, and now they're talking about maybe attacking again. But it's a huge change in terms of trying to get word out and having Anderson Cooper there doing an hour there. Another one of the things, this is a map on voting in the UN to allow Palestine to come in as an observer nation. So it has to do with the U.S. and Israel trying to isolate Palestine. And so the green is for the states that voted to allow Palestine to come in. The black is from member states of the UN whose ambassadors had to go to the restroom at the time the vote was taken. And I might be a little cynical there. And then the red is for the states that voted not to allow Palestine in there. And so what I'm saying is, okay, you had this big effort to isolate Palestine. Who's isolated here? Yeah. And so I think that out of that, United States starts to get the picture, and now they start to have a peace talks. And I paid no attention to this because it's always going on. A friend of ours called it the Einstein peace talks because if you do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result, Einstein said that's a definition of being crazy. But there is a possibility. I've had a couple of friends sort of talk to me about this, and I'll just kind of try to go through sort of what being leaked out. Very little, actually, by their standards, being leaked out, but we have heard some things lately that make some of my friends think that actually there has been an agreement, and now they're trying to get their countries to go along with it in some fashion to make it possible to actually agree. But they've got some sort of agreement that's not been signed yet. So anyway, what would that include? And ensure permanent Israeli control and likely annexation of the large settlement blocks. And what they talk about with that is the trading land of Israel for that is one of the things. You don't know what's going to come out of here, but what they've talked about in the past is land trades. And the thought went through my mind when we first met our attorney. He lives in a Palestinian town that's not too far from the West Bank. Nothing's very far apart there. But his would be part of what's traded. So you think about it. You know, somebody's going to trade away Tacoma, or United States might trade Washington to Canada for some reason. And our citizenship and all that, what are you doing with your citizens when you're going to do? Yeah, okay. Yeah, well, yeah, and our Canadian friends tell us don't come too quickly. But anyway, and the other thing he said is, I know Israeli law. I don't know Palestinian law. So, what does that do to everybody? You're trading land, and of course, Israel's point would have the Arabs go with the land. It wouldn't be like just the land. They're going to have to go. So anyway, that's a reaction to that. And I was going to show you a little bit with this. So here's one of the maps. You can see some others around here, but that's talking about the different things that have been floated in some of the peace talks. And even if you just talk about over on the left with whatever I'm trying to point with, anyway, over on the left, you know, right from left, and see the thing that would leave the most land in the West Bank to the Palestinians, you're still talking about some real incursions there. And the other thing that I've not heard anybody talk about, and I guess I got it on a different slide, is water. But anyway, it's just where are you going to trade? Hussein lives up right in here, sort of between Nazareth and down here. So it'd be this block up here that they'd be talking about getting rid of a large portion of Palestinians. And if they need more land, you know, down here, but water would be a big thing. Israel, of course, wants the fertile Jordan Valley here. And there's no reason that they should have that under international law. It would all be illegal. But anyway, that's part of it. Right of return for Palestinians would only be into the new state. It wouldn't be back into their homes in Palestine. Now, a right of return is an individual right and it is a collective right. So collectively, nobody has the right to give that up for somebody else. I have a right to my home back. Permanent control of Palestine's border crossings and airspace. They would allow Israeli forces hot pursuit into Palestinian territory. And for what? You know, recognition of Israel as a Jewish state. I think bringing that thought home, United States reason, we're told, and they wrote it down, for being created is because we believe that in people that all people were created equal and with certain inalienable rights, that of, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay, United States now wants to enforce other people to say some state people should be unequal. Essentially, that Jewish people should have higher rights. You know, maybe that's their state, but I don't think we have to encourage that. So I've got some other predictions. So Israel maintains troops along the Jordan River Valley. That's been floated, you hear. Palestinian refugees are given money and the ability to immigrate and assimilate into other countries. I don't think that'd be the United States, but they are talking about that. They're also talking about the Jews that were forced from Arab countries back in '48 getting some compensation as well. And a huge amount of money coming into the West Bank. And so economically, it may help you in your village or your family to get along better. And Gaza Strip is basically let off from the cold, so it's going to divide the West Bank from Gaza. And I think somebody hoping that Hamas will come around. And I said before, water rights are not addressed. And also, both entities have said that the agreement needs to be ratified by the people. And Hamas has said they'll go along with anything that's ratified by the Palestinian people in a vote. And my prediction is that it's never going to be to a referendum. It won't pass a referendum in either place. And there may be a lot of stalling about that because people don't want to be the last. I was just going to come back and talk and maybe end with that. I've got two pictures up here. So you remember Abir Aramin. Smatter Elhanan was killed in a bus bombing. She's a Jewish girl. She was killed in the mid-'90s when she was about 14 years old in a bus bombing there. And both of those girls' pictures are up in our office. So Abir's father that you saw before, Bassem, and Smatter's father, Rami, are very close friends, and they go around through Israel talking to high school students, seniors in high school, trying to introduce the kids that are going to be out there in the West Bank in the Israeli military and have them meet a Palestinian. I'm just going to leave it there, and thank you.
Mike, before we get on a little bit, I'm just going to introduce a book and a group, and it's an organization called Combatants for Peace that I think would be of interest to veterans here. They have taken testimony of, I think it's 900 or so mostly veterans, but also some active military. And they have published a book called Our Harsh Logic, and it's on the sheet that I have. I highly recommend the book. Not so much, in fact, I was told by Yehuda Shaul, who spoke in Tacoma, he's one of the founders of the organization. He said, we left out the worst stories. This is not meant to be a sensationalist book. It is meant really with sort of everyday stories that you begin to see over and over again what Israel is intending to do, which is to have so much control over Palestinian lives and to take as much Palestinian land as possible. So highly recommend that book. Also, just one quick thing, Craig was talking about Hamas and how, the U.S. says Hamas is impossible to deal with. When on our delegation to Gaza after Operation Cast Lead, we met with a female Hamas parliamentarian, Huda Naim. She said to us, and she was responsible for human rights, she said, please go back and ask your government not to cut us out of the process because they are strengthening the terrorists here. They are strengthening the extremists. She didn't use the word terrorist. She said the extremist factions here. Don't cut us out of the process. So it's really unfortunate that, Hamas, Gaza really is going to be cut loose. Just a couple other things. Real quick, I wanted to talk about also the Shimonistan group. They are a group of high school students who refuse to go into the Israeli military. There is a young gal named Maya Wind and then a former IDF soldier who are coming to this area in April. So it may be a tour that Veterans for Peace would want to co-sponsor or something and maybe do some counter-recruitment work around. And then boycott, divestment, we're not going to have time to get to because Mike wants to talk about the efforts VFP are doing, but you're happy, we'll be happy to be around and answer some questions. And we, of course, want to take questions from you. So I'm going to hand this back to Mike. Thank you.
Thank you all. I'd like to make sure we cover some of the things that we as VFP chapters can do by beginning with what we in Chapter 35 has done, primarily teaming up with the N30 billion to Israel organization and putting that splits. We split half the cost of this 12 by 48 foot billboard on I-90, and we actually did a second one in town as well. And these billboards have gotten a lot of looks and a lot of commentary. And the other thing we've done is make use of our community access television and put on films beginning with the loss of liberty, the Israeli attack on the 67 Israeli attack on the USS Liberty. There's a lot of things besides BDS we can do, and I'm hoping that we can talk about what ideas that other chapters might have to deal with this, which is not an absolutely impossible situation because all of this happens with our support, our money, and our silence. And I'd like to open it up for questions and commentary on what you've heard. Patrick?
Yeah, question and a statement, or maybe two statements, I don't know. The combatants for peace, we're always looking to have them at like the national convention. So if we could find the ways to, facilitate that.
Weren't they at the one in Seattle?
Huh?
Weren't they at the one in Seattle? There was an organization.
That was 8 years ago. We did have them again.
Yeah. We did have them.
That might have been the refuser group, though, like SF Iran and, well, anyway.
Yeah.
And the other question or the comment that I wanted to make, I'm in Maryland. By the way, I'm the national board chair for VFP. And I teach high school in Maryland. The BDS movement, Mao Zedong used to say to be attacked is a good thing. In Maryland, they are now trying to have state law where any universities which allow BDS, make BDS state support for BDS, to lose massive amounts of money. So this is the counterattack on the BDS movement that we need to be aware of.
Something similar in New York. In
Yeah.
fact, the New
I
York
know it's not only
Times
Maryland, I know that.
actually
Yes.
just wrote something, so it's getting a lot of press. By the way, I just want to stick one piece of information in here that's critical. If you cannot go to the West Bank, or you have people who cannot go, there is a film called Roadmap to Apartheid. I just discovered today. You can watch it online, free on Hulu. So go see that film and recommend it to everyone you know, because it gives the best overview I've ever seen of what's happening on the ground and what the end game, like Craig talked about, with the so-called peace process is. So it's on the sheet, handout sheet, sorry. Roadmap to Apartheid, narrated by Alice Walker, and it's made by Israeli and South African filmmakers. Great
I
film.
just wanted to give a shout out, if anybody here happens to be Jewish or happens to have friends that are Jewish, there is a wonderful organization called Jewish Voice for Peace, JVP. You can go online and find it. We happen, if you're in the area, we have a meeting tomorrow at 2 o'clock at the bridge. And what we're trying to do is show the United States power structure that not all Jews are, American Jews, are rabidly pro-Israeli policies, and most especially, they are against the United States and the taxpayers paying money and giving money for weaponry to Israel to have a destructive policy toward Palestine. So if you want to come up and talk to me afterwards, I'd be glad to talk with you about it.
Any other questions?
And I'm sorry if this is a stupid question, but why is America so much in support of Israel? What's in it for America?
That's a long answer to a quick question. Project for New American Century was written in the mid-90s, basically to overthrow governments in the Middle East that are not favorable to America and Israel. Lots of interests dovetail. Craig, looks like you've got a...
Well, I'd just say it didn't necessarily start out that way, but in the '67 war, which Israel essentially did a blind attack, but won very quickly. We then started backing a winner. And before that, I think Egypt was trying to be, along with India, was trying to be non-aligned. So so that meant not with either United States or the Soviet Union. So it comes out of the Cold War somehow, but after World War II, the Arab nations, as my understanding, really loved the United States. So we managed somehow to blow all that, and now we really use Israel. Sometimes does our really ugliest work, even in South America and Central America. So we use them in some ways too. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of political reasons, but and the other part of that is now Petraeus, and nobody likes to quote Petraeus anymore, but he says it is no longer in the U.S. interests militarily to back Israel. So yeah, that came out a couple of years ago.
Oh, so I wanted to raise the point, the importance of alternative media. And I know this is kind of like promoting my own industry that I'm involved in, but there isn't really very much on the streets here in Tacoma creating a 30-minute or 60-minute broadcastable programming. And it is within your capability to do this. And it is really a kick. I'll tell you, it feels good. I filmed Maya Wind and Netta Mishley and all these people, and Miko Khaled. I filmed Miko Khaled. I've never heard of this guy. Jewish Voice for Peace helped to bring him to Seattle. And I put it up on YouTube, and 500,000 people watched that video.
I've got it on the resource sheet. Thank you,
I mean,
Todd. Yeah.
so the thing is that this is a hot issue, and people want to see that stuff. So what I want somebody in Tacoma to come and film these things that are happening in Tacoma, so that I don't have to come down here and, or that Dennis doesn't have to come up from Olympia or something, and it isn't really that hard. I'll be happy to get in touch with anybody in Tacoma and in Bellingham as well. My roommate Ed Mays, his programs go out on nationwide now on FSTV. That's something, isn't it?
Pirate TV?
Yeah, Pirate TV. That's something, isn't it? That's an accomplishment. Yeah. And all you do is you just get yourself a camera and learn how to connect your sound system, and you can do that. It's broadcastable quality. So
Great suggestion.
come on, get
Thank
somebody
you.
involved here in Tacoma.
Thanks, Steve.
There are dozens of Palestinian films available without requiring rights. It's free, and you can submit them to your community access TV with no problem. And before we close, who else believes that Mike Hastie sounds, or I should say, Jimmy Stewart sounds exactly like Mike Hastie? Thank you. Are we done? Does anyone have any?
I just want to say one thing. I think it was Peggy Love that showed me a photograph when she went back to Palestine with a delegation. There was one of the women that was on the delegation had a sweatshirt on that said, "The occupation will not be televised." And it would be great to have a Palestinian flag on there with that statement. So anyway, I might do that.
You mentioned Miko, and so let me close with something that was written by his sister, who is Smadar's mother. And she says, "For me, to end the war means to understand that all bloods are equal, and that killing in a guerrilla fighting is not more cruel than killing by tanks and airplanes, that sophisticated rockets and homemade bombs kill just the same, and that it takes so little to kill a child and so much to keep her alive. Ending the war means to adopt a dialogic approach to negotiation and not a smart dealer approach, to understand that people talk not in order to win, but in order to come to terms."